I mean, look, the funny thing is that it doesn't take that much grit, right? I mean, I'll tell you, like, literally what was involved in the grit of me trying to write for these publications that didn't take me seriously. And I said, well, yeah, sure, but there's risk involved in anything. There's a risk of staying somewhere too long and not learning enough so that you can pivot in a changing world. But boy, as we get older, we don't have that kind of time anymore. And so you got to understand what is in it for your audience and deliver on that relentlessly.
You're listening to the Radcast. If it's radical, we cover it. Here's your host, Ryan Alford.
Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the latest edition of the Radcast. We're talking with the champion of change today, my friend, Jason Feifer, editor-in-chief at Entrepreneur Magazine. What's up, Jason?
I appreciate the enthusiasm by which I was just introduced.
Hey, man, we all have to do something well. I always want my guests to feel welcome to the show.
You've done so. I appreciate it.
No, man, great to have you. I've been, I study all my guests, and from afar, been a fan, been listening to your show.
Thank you.
Certainly have heard of, the little magazine you write. You're writing at it for. Heard it before a little bit. I think I only have like seven editions like sitting on my desk somewhere, I'm sure.
I'm glad it made its way down to South Carolina.
I know. So host of Build for Tomorrow. Did I get that right?
That is correct.
Yes. I know you got your own show. So appreciate you making time for the Radcast.
I mean, look, a show called the Radcast. How can you not say yes?
Well, there was some strategy when naming it. Well, number one, our agency is called Radical, so it was a nice, easy transition. But I was like, all right, you gotta want people to come on the show,
Mm-hmm.
And so we're getting, the who's who now, like Jason Feifers of the world. But at the beginning, we needed our name to work really hard for us.
I appreciate it. I mean, look, it's who doesn't want to go on a show called the Radcast? Also, even if you think the Radcast is maybe a little much as a name, you have to have respect for someone who says, well, I'm just doing it anyway. I'm calling it the Radcast.
That's right.
It's rad. It's a cast. I don't need to know anything else.
No, exactly. Well, I want our audience to know about you, Jason. I do want to. Let's give them a little bit of that taste of that. I know you got a book coming out. We'll get to that. You've got your podcast and stuff. You've done a lot of interviews. Hey, we don't have to rehash everything, but I do want to give everyone, I think, a lot of our listeners enjoy kind of hearing that professional journey, as you call it. So I'd love to give everybody a little taste for yours.
Sure. So I started not having any idea what it is that I wanted to do, but I knew that I liked to write. And I knew that as a reporter, people will just tell you stuff. It's kind of amazing, actually. You just go out and you say, I would like to interview you. And they say, come on into my home and let me tell you all the things. And that was a pretty unbelievable experience. And so I started as a community newspaper reporter. It was just the only job that I could get. And I mean, look, I'm not going to take you through every moment of my career. It would be too much. But I'll tell you this. The very, very beginning, I was at this. It was called the Gardner News, Gardner, Massachusetts. Tiny little paper, north central Massachusetts, covering nothing because nothing's going on in Gardner. And I did it for about a year. And I will tell you something. It was a grumpy year for me because I felt like I'm too good for this place. I have all these ambitions and I should be writing for the New York Times. And two things about this. Number one, looking back on it now, what a jerk. Because the thing is, if I was too good for that place, I wouldn't have been at that place. And I think that we need to stop wherever we are and say, what can I learn from this experience right here, right now? Instead of wishing that I was somewhere else, why don't I work towards that somewhere else by starting right now?
Bloom where you're planted.
There you go. It's a nice cliche.
Yeah.
And so for good reason. And then number two is that I, after a year, thought to myself, all right, well, look, if I'm really serious about this and I'm not just grumbling, what does it take to go somewhere else? What does it take to work at these large publications? And I realized that, working at the Gardner News is not going to get me there by itself, because at no time in the history of the world will somebody at the New York Times pick up a copy of the Gardner News, read the story I did on the middle school play and call me up and say, "Ed, we're bringing it up to the big time." It's like never going to happen ever, ever. And so I needed to go to them. And so I quit. I quit the newspaper and I sat in my bedroom for 9 months and I cold pitched everybody. I didn't have any connections. I knew nobody. And I'm writing editors of the Washington Post and the Boston Globe and the Associated Press. And eventually I start to land stories in these publications. It takes a long time. There's a lot of being ignored. And even when I do land a story, as exciting as that sounds, I will tell you that the money that comes along with it is not that exciting. So I would bust my butt to get $500 out of the Washington Post or something like that. But after 9 months of this, I had proven something. And what I had proven was I can work at a different level. And I didn't do it by just sitting around and grumbling and expecting somebody to hand it to me. I went out and I did it myself. I went to them. And that is a lesson that I've carried forward throughout my career as I then got into magazines eventually, moved to New York, worked at a whole bunch of different magazines. Maxim, that was a terrible decision. Men's Health, a better decision. Fast Company, a good decision. Entrepreneur, a great decision. And the lesson that I always took was go to them. Never, ever wait for somebody to come to you with an opportunity. They never, ever will. You go to them.
I love it. A lot of lessons, a lot to unpack there. And as I was listening, I was saying, I joked about the, bloom, not even joked, but just stated the bloom where you're planted. But, but then you just expanded from there. And it's funny, people, there's a lot of talk now about manifestation and all those things. And I buy some of that. But there's still an action that has to take place. Like it doesn't just happen. And I love that notion of just sticking your nose in it. I don't know if like enough people have the grit to do that, but that's really what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, the funny thing is that it doesn't take that much grit, right? I mean, I'll tell you, literally, what was involved in the grit of me trying to write for these publications that didn't take me seriously. Well, I had to go out and find some stories. Okay. So you do some research, talk to some folks, you find some stuff, you learn how to pitch, go out, buy a book, learn some stuff, figure out some people's email addresses, send it off. What's the worst that could happen? I'll tell you, they ignore you or they say no. That's the worst. Can you live? Can you survive that? I could. Turns out it's not that hard. You get a rejection, you move along. And this is the thing. I mean, I think that a lot of times we think about, how hard this is going to be, what a terrible road this is going to be. But most of the time, sticking your neck out just means putting in some effort without knowing how it's going to be rewarded and then enduring a lot of non-reward. And if you can do that, then you can put yourself in a position to learn. Do it over and over and over again. Fail, 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 fail. Eventually you will get somewhere. Ryan Reynolds once told me that in order to get good at something, you have to be willing to be bad. And I love that line because it is so true.
Very true. Very true. And you bringing that up, like I've seen you answer this, and you can Google this and you'll find Jason's answer to this. So I'm gonna lead him down a different road, I hope.
Sure.
You've now, whether it was you classified it as bad, your bad stop at Maxim, all I'm remembering is like high school days and pretty women in bikinis. But you've now both an entrepreneur, I'm sure at Fast Company, others. You've been around and interviewed and told stories about a lot of successful people. So I'm going to stop short of saying, what's the formula for that? I'm going to stop short of that because I think you've talked about it. But more importantly, maybe have you narrowed in on a characteristics of guys like Ryan Reynolds or Jimmy Fallon, who just did
Yep.
Is there a single characteristic or trait or two that might be not something people would expect that you've seen?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you the usual answer to that. And in telling you the usual answer, I'll see if I can come up with an unusual answer. The usual answer is adaptability.
Okay.
I mean, this is the number one thing that I see. It's the reason why I wrote the book that I did, which is called Build for Tomorrow, because it's all about how to see change as opportunity. I do. I mean, that Ryan Reynolds quote that I just used came in the context of us talking about how he moved from one kind of career to another. I mean, from being an actor to running an ad agency. He didn't intend to do that. What had happened was that he could barely get anybody to take Deadpool seriously. And so he basically did the marketing himself with a guy that he met at the studio. And they did all this crazy, wacky stuff that, I mean, this is all stuff you would really appreciate, like, on basically no budget. And it drove so much interest that it made Deadpool, I mean, now I'm going to say the wrong thing, but like one of the highest grossing movies or something. It was very, very successful. And so how do you do that? Well, the answer is that you're willing to be bad. You are willing to go through the transition where you're in an uncomfortable place and you don't exactly know what's next, but you just have the commitment to know that moving forward is literally the only way to get to something better. And I see that. I see people do that over and over and over and over again. They have an ability to get past the barrier that I think most people slam into when there is some kind of change or that they're trying to do something that they're not familiar, which is that they panic. That's the first thing most people do, is they panic. And I've panicked. I'm sure Ryan Reynolds panicked. Jimmy Fallon definitely panicked. We talked about it. And then you get to a place where you say, all right, there has to be more than panic. There has to be more than this. And the people who are able to get through that first wall, I think, are the self-selected group of people who can build something that is successful.
I love it. And you know what? I almost lump it in because I get asked that same question sometimes. And I almost lump it in. It's a little different. There's something about highly successful people and risk tolerance that is highly correlated. And I think what you just described, though it's a little different than like financial risk. It's still risk, right? At the end of the day, there's like this adaptability to change and risk tolerance that seems to go hand in hand.
I think that's right. It's funny. I was just doing a TV segment this morning on a local New York station called Pix 11, and we were talking about people starting their own businesses, and in particular, we were starting about franchise. It was a segment about franchises, and so one of the hosts says, "But isn't that really risky, getting into that?" And I said, "Well, yeah, sure, but there's risk involved in anything. I mean, there's risk staying at the job that you have right now. You could get fired tomorrow. There's also the risk, if you want to really think of it as a risk, which I think that you should, there's a risk of staying somewhere too long and not learning enough so that you can pivot in a changing world. I mean, the person who like stuck it out for 20 years as a movie reviewer at a regional newspaper, as soon as there were no need anymore for somebody to be hired or employed full-time as a movie reviewer at a regional newspaper, this person had nothing else to do with themselves because they hadn't taught themselves anything else. They hadn't put themselves in the position where they could learn new things that the marketplace desires or rewards. That's a risk. Everything that you do is a risk. So it's funny. In some ways it is risk tolerance. In some ways it is just risk perspective. It is just saying, I would rather place my risk here than there. I'm not necessarily taking a larger risk. Life is a risk. Every single thing that I do every day is a risk. I would rather put my risk to better use. And that's not to say that starting a new business is right for everybody. It is not. But I certainly would encourage, whatever it is that you do, that you think of every opportunity as an opportunity to spend that risk most wisely.
Very, very well stated, my friend. Talking with Jason Feifer, editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. I really like this quote, one of your latest articles. When you narrow your path, you limit your chances of finding what will make you happiest. I want you to expound upon that a bit, if you don't mind, for everybody listening.
Sure. The very first time that I noticed people do this was years and years ago, when I was still mostly identifying as just a kind of pure magazine guy, a journalist. And I would be invited to come speak in journalism classes as I talked to these college kids who all aspire to work in magazines. And they would inevitably, in every class, one or two kids would raise their hand and they would say something along the lines of, My goal is to work at Entertainment Weekly. What do you think I should do to get to Entertainment Weekly? And I just think that this is a terrible way to think. It's just an awful way to think, because fine, you have a goal of working at a place. That's good. Having a goal is great. Having some direction to move in simply so that you can start moving is wonderful, right? Because we got to move somewhere.
Yep.
We got to go somewhere. But do not limit every decision that you make based on an ultimate goal, because you don't know if that goal is actually going to be any good. You could get to Entertainment Weekly and it could suck. And I will tell you something. I have so many friends who aspire to work at certain places and they got there and it was not at all what they expected. You cannot limit yourself like that. When you limit your options along the way, all you are doing is turning down all these amazing new opportunities to learn, to grow, to discover a path that you didn't know was available. One of the reasons that those kids are saying, I would like to work at Entertainment Weekly, is because they only know of a certain number of outcomes for their career. They're only aware of a few. And I'm going to hazard to guess that although a small number of them may have landed at their dream job that they aspire to do, the vast majority of them, and I include myself in this, ended up somewhere that they could not have possibly predicted, and that frankly they may not have even been aware of. When I started my career, I never heard of Entrepreneur Magazine. What the hell is that? But eventually, because I made enough choices throughout my career, choices that were based not on one ultimate goal, but rather of seeing something and saying, I wonder what's over there. Maybe there's something that I can learn. I got to a place where I had the necessary skills to take over a magazine called Entrepreneur and then see what else was available to me because of it. Speaking, book writing, podcasting, going on TV, all this stuff. This is not stuff that I ever thought that I was going to do. And again, it would not have been possible unless I took those unexpected paths. And that's what we all need to do. We cannot close ourselves off to those. That's where the real opportunity is.
I like that a lot. And I there's a couple terms I use. There's unintended consequences in self-limiting behavior. Like, we all think we know what the consequences, but the unintended consequences, what you just described, because everybody thinks, oh, I'm hyper-focused, I'm going to get to that one destination, all that. But if you only go down that one road, you may or may not get there. But I think I don't know, there's just unintended consequences in every decision. And I think when you get too narrow, that's what ends up happening. I do want to ask you, Jason, what for you makes good story? Where does the storytelling for you when you're, I mean, I'm sure for, I don't want to say, I know you described the humble beginnings, and it hasn't always been as easy as, telling a story about Fallon maybe, but
yeah, right.
And I'm not gonna say that's a layup, but I'm just saying, but
yeah, no, those are easy.
Yeah.
Those are great. Those are great. I mean, look, that you work to have those kinds of things in your pocket.
Yeah.
They certainly
and you've
don't
worked,
come easy.
you worked for them. But what's a good story to you? What gets your attention?
Do you mean, because there are two ways that people ask me this. Number one is storytelling.
Yeah, I don't mean like this is not the how do you get an Entrepreneur Magazine question. This was the second way. This is more for you, writing and evaluating and doing what you do because you're a storyteller. More of that.
Got it. So it starts. So thanks for asking that version instead of the how do you get an entrepreneur, because that's the one I usually get. The answer is that it has to start with the audience, right? It doesn't actually start with some sort of tenets of storytelling. It starts with the audience. What does the audience expect? How am I serving the audience? The way that I tell a story in Entrepreneur is so different from the way that I tell a story in my podcast, is different from how I tell my story. I tell a story in some other way, because what I have to be mindful of, and this is what I drive myself insane thinking this, is I imagine my audience to basically be impatient and very, very expectant to see value immediately. What is in it for me? Why am I listening to this? Why are you demanding my time? People's time is the most valuable thing that they have, and I am out there demanding it. I'm now demanding their time and everything that I do. And so I have to think, I gotta earn that time. I got to earn that time on a second by second basis. I cannot take it for granted at all. And so I have to know, what is this for? What is it for? And so to me, the very first thing that I have to evaluate is how do I have the thing that they want? And I'll give you an example because we're talking about Jimmy Fallon. Why am I writing about Jimmy Fallon in Entrepreneur Magazine? It's a good question. And the answer is because, I mean, well, let's just be frank, putting a celebrity on the cover of a magazine is a much better way to sell a magazine than putting a piece of fruit. And so
you are a business, you're trying to sell copies here. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Nope.
So now I want to make sure that it's valuable. I want to make sure that it's valuable to people. It can't just be Jimmy Fallon for the sake of having a photo of Jimmy Fallon. It's got to be valuable. Now, Jimmy Fallon does a thing that most people do not do and never will do. The level of success that he's had, and he's hosting the Tonight Show, most people are not going to do that. So in some ways, the basic outline of Jimmy Fallon is very unrelatable. So I have to start with, why does somebody pick up a copy of Entrepreneur Magazine? Well, the answer is because they are looking for some kind of growth and insight for their careers or their business. That's why they're picking up the magazine. Okay. So what could they want from Jimmy Fallon? Well, first of all, I've made a selection of Jimmy Fallon because I think that they can get something out of Jimmy Fallon. And now I got to go in and I got to deliver on that. So when I go in to talk to Jimmy Fallon, I am talking to Jimmy Fallon about, Jimmy Fallon, but I am really mindful of the reader. And I'm mindful that people don't care about Jimmy Fallon's just career arc. They could find that somewhere else. What is the story that I can tell? What is the unique value proposition that Entrepreneur has because it understands its audience? And to me, the way that I approach these stories is that it never really can be about the person who I'm writing about. It is, but it's really about something else, something unique, something that anybody can learn from this person, because this person is actually a great representation of, and they have thought through this thing. For Jimmy Fallon, it was a story about finding your why, finding your mission and your purpose, how to identify it and how to put it into action. That's what that story was about. And every question that I asked Jimmy was in some way pushing him to articulate that, to identify it, to dig into what it was like for him as a way of helping other people do it for themselves. And every other story that I ever do is about that. I profiled Bethany Frankel. What was that story about? It wasn't about Bethany Frankel. It was about time management. I profiled Mark Wahlberg. That wasn't a story about Mark Wahlberg. It was a story about diligence. How did he learn diligence? This is the way that you have to approach, I think, all storytelling. You have to start with what your audience wants, and then at every step along the way of developing that story, you have to make sure that you're creating the material and then delivering the material so that your audience feels satisfied, so that they're not saying, stop wasting my time. Whenever you're telling a story, have that in your head. And a chorus of people, a Greek chorus, who are basically singing, stop wasting my time. And you better not waste their time.
You know what everybody's favorite radio station is? WIFM. What's in it for me? That's what you just described, brother. It's true, though.
It's true, though.
It is. What's in it for me?
and that's fine. I don't begrudge people that, right?
Yep.
Why would I begrudge people that? Because that's what I'm doing. What's in it for me is how I consume things too. I don't have time for your random crap. I mean, I did when I was in my teens and I just wanted to burn Saturday nights going to the movies. I'll watch anything. But boy, as we get older, we don't have that kind of time anymore. And so you got to understand what is in it for your audience and deliver on that relentlessly.
Yeah. And I think the days of, showing X celebrity and the mansion they live in and the Porsche that they drive or whatever, I'm not saying there's not a time and a place for that article, but you've kind of moved more into, and I think this is what I love about, what you guys are doing in Entrepreneur, is more of that aspiration motivation, from what, because, I can't really, I mean, I've been quasi-successful in my career, but not Jimmy Fallon successful, but I can aspire to be like him when I see everyday things like his why that motivates what's made him successful. And I think that's
I
what
had an insight. Yes, I agree with that. I had this insight that has guided a lot of what I've done at Entrepreneur, and any time that I talk to the entrepreneur audience writ large. And that is, I realized that there are a lot of people in this world who call themselves entrepreneurs. And it's a word that has in some ways ceased to have any specific meaning, but also that I think has a lot of meaning. To me, I define entrepreneur as someone who makes things happen for themselves. It's a mindset as much as anything else. So how do I serve all those people? How am I useful to those people? It's really hard. You don't do it by, I can't put 30 pages of advice on how to do your Series C round, because that's just not relevant to a broad enough range of people. So how do I do it? And what the realization that I came to that guided so much of what I do is that there is one thing that everyone who identifies as an entrepreneur has in common. Only one thing, whether they are selling stuff on eBay or they're running a venture-backed company in Silicon Valley. One thing. And here it is. The experience of being an entrepreneur. That's it. That's the one thing that they have, the experience of being an entrepreneur. Because whether or not you are struggling to sell something on eBay or you're Jimmy Fallon, you have the same emotional experience of your journey, that it feels lonely and crazy. You don't know what you're doing at times, and you've got to put yourself out there. That everybody relates to that. And so I don't think of it necessarily as motivational and aspirational, though it can come off that way. What I really think of it is like, let's talk to that thing that is so core to what you're doing that in some ways people miss it. People don't acknowledge it. And I have found that by being real about that stuff and by getting other people to engage with it, I create something that feels like community. Because now there's a belonging, there's a reason. You come to this brand and you say, this is something that I'm not seeing elsewhere. I feel this, I need this. This is speaking to me. And this is a part of storytelling too, knowing what your audience needs. And so I have approached it that way, and I filter every story through it in some way. People pitch me to your point about there used to be all these shows about like people's mansions and stuff. And who cares about that? I never liked that. I say, I don't like success stories. Don't like success stories. I like problem solving stories. Success stories are they're not relatable. Nobody wants to know about your success because your success is only exciting to you. But everybody wants to know about your problems because your problems are their problems. There aren't that many problems in the world. There aren't. There's a bunch of, like everybody is experiencing some version of the same few sets of problems. So how do we get through it? What can we learn from each other by getting through it? The more that you can identify that universal thing that's bringing your audience together, the better you're going to serve them.
Bingo. Ding, ding, ding. If I had my sound effects going, you nailed it. We could talk for hours and we've zipped through it. I do want to talk a little bit. I know Build for Tomorrow is coming out later this year. Yeah. In our condensed time frame here, what can you tell us about Build for Tomorrow?
Yeah. So Build for Tomorrow, the book, comes out September 6th, 2022, although it is available for pre-order now, whenever it is that you're listening to this. Now is the answer. And here's the thesis behind Built for Tomorrow, the book. Change happens in 4 phases. All change happens in 4 phases. Panic, adaptation, new normal, wouldn't go back. And what I want to do is help people get through those 3 phases in the beginning. Panic. It's terrible. It's panic. It's the thing that you slam into the wall and you can never recover from. Adaptation. What is it that you do? What is it that you have available to you? New normal. Start to build a foundation up from this shifting ground, and then get to wouldn't go back. Wouldn't go back is that time where you say, this new thing that I have is so valuable to me that I wouldn't want to go back to a time before I had it. This is the cycle of change. You've gone through it 10 times before. You just may have forgotten because the things that you're comfortable with now, you forgot were once new and replaced some old thing that you used to be comfortable with. Let's get to this place where we understand change, where we feel comfortable with it, where we're not fearful of it, and where we can start to build greatness for ourselves and for others because we can get to wouldn't go back. That's what the book is. It's a kind of guide to doing that, using stories from the smartest people that I've spoken with, a couple of whom we've mentioned here, as well as the history of innovation. I dive into, crazy things like why the car was once feared and then was accepted, why the recorded music, why musicians used to once tried to stop recorded music technology, and what we can learn today about changes in our industry from what happened to them. So that's the book.
I love it. So Build for Tomorrow, pre-order it now, go look it up. All right, Jason, I need you for a lightning round of what we call rad or fad. I'm going to give you 4 keywords. All I need, you can one word. No one seems to just say one word. They always like that. And you're allowed to give context.
I'm very bad. Yeah, okay. I'm very, very bad at one word answers. But let's see what we can do.
Rad or fad? You get the pretext, right?
Yes, I do.
All right. First one, the metaverse. Rad or fad?
I don't know how to answer. All right, I'm going to give you it's a rad fad. It is. Metaverse is it's a fad now, in that the version of the metaverse that we have right now is not the version of the metaverse that we ultimately will have, but it's the starting point for an idea that will be very exciting in the future. But don't feel like you have to join the metaverse right now.
Boom. TikTok for the masses. Rad
TikTok
or fad?
For the masses.
Is that, it was a kind of a, I think we're in the 25, we were in the 15 to 20 year old stage. I think we're in like the 25 to 35 stage. Is this going to be, this going to be a mass player? Is it always going to be niche, i.e. like, I don't know, Snapchat?
Oh no. All right, I'm going to go simple on that one. Rad.
All right, there you go. Finally, I'm going to keep it to 3. NFTs. Okay. Rad or fad? Every buzzword from... I
like you're throwing them all at me.
I know.
Oh my God, I'm going to get a lot of hate for this answer, but I'm going with fad. I think that the technology behind NFTs is exciting and interesting. I think that what you're seeing in the marketplace right now is unsustainable and is probably a lot of garbage anyway. People buying their own NFTs to pump the numbers, and I just don't think that lasts.
You're a smart man, my friend. Hey, where can everybody keep up with Jason Feifer?
Well, you can go to my if you go to my website. Here's what I'd love you to do. I mean, you can find me on social. That's awesome. At Hey Feifer, et cetera, podcast, Build for Tomorrow, just like the book. But if you go to jasonfeifer.com right now, jasonfeifer.com, JASONFEIFER.com, and you click that button that says free training, what you will get is an hour-long free audio course that I put together about how to become more adaptable, how to feel more comfortable with change. I have heard from so many people who have gone through it and who have really appreciated it, and it is there for you. So please go and check that out.
I love it, brother. Adding value left and right. Executive.
That's what we're here for.
Executive editor of Entrepreneur Magazine.
Oh, editor-in-chief.
Editor-in-chief.
Fad me.
Sorry.
Don't fad me.
Don't
That's
fad
a rad.
me. Rad me, fad you. Editor-in-chief. Sorry.
There you go.
There we go. We got it. I want to make sure I get all my monitors. The best one was Champion of Change. I just wanted to call you that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's funny. You put something in your social media bios and people just start using it. It's a funny thing.
Yes. You need a jersey, like Champion of Change. Get you a ring, a championship ring.
Some nice bling.
Some
I
bling.
need some good bling.
Yeah, just our gold chain. There you go.
Yeah, I don't have enough of that.
I don't know if I can pull it off either, brother. Hey, Jason, I really appreciate your time.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate yours.
Hey, guys, you know where to find us. We're at theradcast.com. Search for Champion of Change. You'll find all the content from today. We really appreciate Jason Feifer. We'll see you next time on the Radcast.